All right. So as I was saying, thank you very much for joining us. Today we continue with our series of webinars, which are held the last Thursday of every month with different relevant and updated topics that for sure will contribute to the professional development of English teachers in Colombia. We, of course, invite you to participate in our annual conference From the Global South, Our Roots, Perspectives, and Transformations. The conference will be at Universidad de Caldas in the beautiful city of Manizales, Colombia, in October, from October the 12th to the 14th. So before we start, remember to book your plane tickets in your hotel so we can see you in Manizales. This month, as a copy, is having different activities. We started a series of national workshops, starting in Armenia. Last week we were in Tunja, at Universidad Pedagógica Tecnológica de Colombia. And on May the 3rd, we will be in Universidad Autónoma de Cádiz. Me hace cuando there's a lot of background noise. Good, there, sir. All right, so next May the 3rd, we will be in Universidad Autónoma de Manizales. We will be sharing the link if you want to join us to these free national workshops. On May 11th, we will be in a special talk talking about technologies in education and in artificial intelligence. We will be in Universidad La Salle on May 10th, 5 p.m. And on May the 24th, we will be in Universidad Minuto de Dios with another special talk about oracy and the importance of visible thinking. So there are many things going on. But what is going on today is that we have our webinar, Reflective Practice, the Key to Your PD. And for that, we have our presenters that I want to talk a little bit about them. So we have Shay, and we also have Anna. And Shay is the co-creator of the Teacher Think Aloud podcast and is an expert series of webinar moderator with Bridge University. She has served as an English language instructor for over a decade, a program coordinator and curriculum specialist in both university and community-based programs, and English language fellow with the U.S. Department of State. Her interests include holistic teacher development, learning identity, and the colonial ethics in the language classroom. And we also have Anna, welcome Anna, who is also the co-creator of the Teacher Think Aloud podcast. Follow them, please, in Instagram and listen to them. I'm like, it's amazing. And she is Learning and Development Coordinator of English Language Programs in the U.S. Department of State. She previously worked as an English language fellow in Armenia and Ukraine and adjunct instructor at various institutions in Washington State and New York, and assessment developer for both small and large scale tests. Her interests include development second language, writing media literacy, and language assessment. So, wow. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for accepting this invitation. We're looking forward to hearing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us. And I'm just going to get my screen share set up here so that we can get started. So, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Adriana. That was truly lovely. And thank you for the extensive introduction of our backgrounds. So as you mentioned, we are a podcast, so you have the QR code here. And then while we are kind of rolling into things, Shay has posted some questions and for you to just introduce yourselves in the chat. So please tell us your name, your location, and a little bit about your teaching context. So type of institute, and a little bit about your learners. Okay.
Yes, and so, oh, pardon me, I have now, of course, there's something lodged in my throat as I have to begin talking. That's always how it works. But welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. We do invite you, if you're feeling up to it, to turn on your cameras. We'd love to see you instead of looking at little black squares with your names in them. We are going to be chatting a lot throughout this session, so just be able to see your faces would be really great. But as Adriana and Anna have said, we are the co-creators of the Teacher Think Aloud podcast. a podcast for reflective practice for teachers of English around the world. You could find us wherever you get your podcasts. You see all of the icons down there. And as Anna mentioned, also by scanning the QR code on this slide, you can locate us very easily. I will kind of skip over some of the background that Adriana has already kindly provided, but I've been working with English language learners for nearly 15 years already, typically within a university or a community-based setting. I am currently located in Chicago, USA. It's starting to just warm up here, which is nice. The sun is at least shining today, not as bitter as usual. And I actually connected with Asakopi when I was writing an article for Bridge Education Group related to English language teacher associations and the innovations that they've come up with to support teachers through the pandemic. So I was lucky enough to meet Katie and Claudia then. And so it was really exciting when they asked us to come on and talk about our podcast and about reflective pedagogy. Colombia is a very special place in my heart. I've spent a lot of time in Medellin in particular. So I'm really happy to be here with you today. So thanks again for having us.
Right, and so Shay and I are actually not in the same city. So I live in Seattle, Washington, and today is actually, it rains a lot in Seattle, in case you didn't know. It's famous for being gray all the time, but today is one of the very first sunny days of the year. So I'm very, very excited to be in a positive mood for all of you. And so, as Adriana mentioned, I am the Learning and Development Coordinator at English Language Programs for U.S. Department of State. And yeah, I really have fallen into this idea of reflective practice with Shay in the last few years as we've been developing out our podcast. And so I'm really excited to be here with Shay to as our podcast to speak with you.
Mm-hmm. And Anna, I'm just taking a look at the chat box. Please continue to introduce yourselves to us. We're interested in knowing, in particular, what kind of institution you're working at, what's the age level of the age of your learners, their learner proficiency. I see that we've got quite a few university teachers here, Anna, so we can definitely connect. And also, we've got Jimmy, he's working in a rural public school, another university. So please let us know where you're coming to us from.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump in. Thank you for coming and welcome to our community of practice. In today's webinar, we're going to go over a few different objectives. First, we will explore the tenets of reflective pedagogy and how it can help us sustain meaningful professional learning. Then we will reflect, always reflecting, we will reflect on how we can cultivate meaningful professional development that honors our unique needs and situations. And then lastly, we will explore opportunities for growth in the contemporary professional learning landscape.
Excellent. Yeah. And so we are going to start with some reflection, and we're going to ask you to reflect multiple times with us throughout this webinar. So the first is we're starting to get meta here. We're reflecting on the process of reflecting. So we want to know, how often do you stop and reflect on your teaching? A couple of responses might be, sometimes, all the time, you're not sure, maybe you're feeling like, that's kind of a weird question, I don't want to tell you. So please, in the chat box, put the number that most closely aligns with your response. How often do you stop and reflect? All right, we've got 3. Good. Yeah, 3, 2. Okay, sometimes. Anyone else? 2, 3. All right. No one's saying 1. Maybe, I don't know. Feel free to be transparent. We're not judging you, right? It's a process. We're all working on it. So lots of 2s and 3s predominantly here. All right, we got a 1. Thank you, Juliana, for letting us know. All right, excellent. So This podcast was really born out of a love for reflection, and particularly a love for shared reflection. So let's take a look at sort of this question that brings us all together today. Why reflect? So John Dewey, who was the father of experiential learning, said, "We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience." Now, obviously, as a podcast that is, grounded within reflective pedagogy, we really like it. We think it's important. But this is backed by theory. The importance of reflection is something that, is it's in the literature. When we often hear this refrain, you live and you learn, or, you have to get experience. And I think that those are two valid refrains that we all are familiar with. But to grow, sorry, if you could all just mute yourselves. So sorry. But in order to grow, Dewey argues that it goes a bit further than just simply experiencing something, that it's not experience that teaches us, that it's the reflection that happens after experiencing something that actually inspires growth. Okay. So Dewey sort of had four major key points about what reflective practice is. The first is that reflective practice is this meaning-making process from experience. So again, going that step further, not just experiencing, but pulling meaning, deriving meaning from that experience. He thought that it was a rigorous way of thinking about teaching and about learning. I like that use of the word rigor, right? There's intentionality within that word. He says that it's a communal act best done with others, and we will share some ways that we think that is true today. And lastly, he says that it's a set of attitudes about teaching and learning. Okay, Hannah.
Yeah, so I mean those are a lot of different ideas, but I think in a nutshell, what we can say is, when we ask this question, what is reflective pedagogy? It's simply the practice of reflecting on our actions and engaging in a process of continuous learning. And so note the emphasis on the term continuous learning, right? This is an ongoing process. And so another theory to draw on here is David Kolb's experiential learning cycle. And so the learning cycle starts with this idea of concrete experience. So you have to have the experience to start reflecting on it. The next step then is reflective observation. And so that's just observing what happened, and then starting to have some reflections on that. What happened? Why did it not go the way I planned, etc. And starting to reflect on that. Abstract conceptualization is then starting to take these observations and understanding what the pattern is, what it is that we need to readjust to become, to do better next time, or maybe to do more of the good thing that we did. And then finally, active experimentation, that it's just applying this, whatever we have learned from reflecting and abstracting these ideas, applying that to the next time. And it is this ongoing cycle.
Okay, so now we're going to ask you to reflect again, as promised. So we're curious, when do you most commonly reflect on your teaching? We'd love for you to share in the chat box. Do you reflect in the moment, after the lesson, maybe when you go to the break room or the teacher's lounge after your day is over, when you're prepping for the next class? Do you dream about your lessons? I do. I'm kind of like obsessive about teaching. So I'm dreaming about and I'm reflecting on my teaching in my dreams. So when do you reflect? We'd love to hear from you. Okay. Adriana says, like, usually after, and especially when it doesn't go how you expected. Anyone else? It can be like time of day even. Okay, Kathy, yeah, you second that idea when it wasn't what you expected it to be, when we're sort of like thrown off, right? It wasn't what we anticipated. You need to pause and sort of think about what happened.
Or when
Anyone
you're not
else?
seeing the outcomes, in the longer term. Yeah.
Noticing before, during, and after, but mostly after if things weren't as expected. Good, I love that continuous cycle Nora's calling out. Reflecting after my classes. Preparing when you're preparing for your next lessons. Thank you, Manuela. Clara says all the time, but especially after each lesson, and then especially why it didn't go according to plan. So that's great. So we have a room here full of very reflective educators we're seeing here, Hannah. Awesome. Well, so, in response to what you've all shared, most of us are doing what Schoen refers to as reflection in action. That means we're reflecting in the moment, right? When something doesn't go according to plan, or if something's working well, we either shift gears, we change what we're doing, or we keep doing what we're doing because it's working. But it's that sort of ad hoc reflection, doing it in the moment and making changes or not, depending on what's going on in our classrooms, right? We've all had those moments where we notice, oh, these students aren't exactly collaborating the way that I expect they would, or maybe even, this is working really well. I don't want to break up this magical moment and move into something new. Let's stay with this. So those are both examples of reflection in action. But what's easy to overlook is this reflection on action. And so this is reflecting after the fact, when we have the time and the posterity to really think about how things went and how to readjust our teaching practices moving forward. So ideally, we're reflecting both in action in the moment and on action that we took that is after the fact, right? The ideal sort of combination is doing both of these things. And so Karen saying in the chat box, there's not a specific moment, sometimes after the class, where the discipline was a disaster and you can't arrive to the point in class. Yeah, so sometimes even when you're in class and something's going horribly wrong, something's disastrous is happening, you don't always have the time to pause and sort of regain your footing, right? You kind of just do what you need to do to get through the class, and that's okay. We've been there, right? All right.
And so let's move into another question for reflection. I want you to think about how you reflect, and by how you reflect, specifically what kinds of tools you use. Is it something abstract, so you're just kind of thinking about it, or is there some more tangible kind of activity that you're doing to reflect on that? So if you would like to please answer in the chat, we'd love to hear some of the things that you're doing, some of the tools that you're using to reflect on your own practices. And it is okay if you haven't necessarily found the thing, but if you have any ideas, or if you just want to admit, I don't really have a tool necessarily, that's also okay. Writing and annotating, it's really helpful to be able to come back. Journaling, yeah, it's really helpful to be able to come back to what you were thinking, so that you don't just lose it. You have the thought and you move on. It's really helpful to be able to come back to it and kind of see your evolution. Okay. All right. Well, so I think that writing things down, taking notes of what I need to change, that's all really great. This is a really wonderful way to reflect on our teaching in a more, kind of principled way. So let's think a little bit more about what some of these options are. So some strategies, we're getting into strategies for reflection. So as you've already mentioned, you can keep a teaching journal. That is probably the most straightforward And I want to emphasize here that, you know, you don't have to write a journal, you know, that's really long, and you don't have to write in paragraphs. You can just write bullet points, you know, it just quick notes. Having that teaching journal as a practice is really helpful. I think we recommend creating some kind of rubric. So, you know, something where you're like measuring specific things and, you know, just kind of getting a sense of, oh, did I do that today? Did I not do that today? Did I forget that? Do I need to improve on that? Different aspects of your teaching that you can just kind of check off or remember, oh, right, I should be thinking of that. I should be thinking of my time management. I should be thinking of, you know, making sure everybody in the class has a turn to speak on a rubric, and then just checking it off. I also think voice memos are really great, because writing things down for me sometimes just feels like a lot of work. But if I'm just walking around my kitchen with my phone and recording, you know, oh, today I had all these classes on my phone, you know, with a voice recording app on my phone, I can just have my thoughts come out and not feel like I have to filter them in writing. And this one's a little bit scary, watching a recording of yourself while you're teaching. It is hard to get recordings, and you do need permission, especially, you know, it's important when you have younger learners to get parental permission to film anything that's taking place in your class. But it is really helpful to go back and watch yourself, because then you can take notes a little bit more specifically if you have the time. And there's more that you can do, but these are some really great ones.
Great. Yeah. So I just want to highlight in the chat box, Juliana said she sees how the kids are feeling and how they're enjoying. And I think that that is something worth paying attention to, right? Just, you know, in this idea of a self-assessment rubric, maybe that's what you're paying attention to. How are the kids receiving the information that you're sharing? And maybe your focus is like social emotional learning. So Juliana, I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because we really do work for the students. It's not just about us. Us being more reflective teachers means that we're hopefully more effective, and that benefits our students. So thanks for bringing that up. So Anna shared some really great ideas for independent reflection. And so I want to share sort of the other side of the coin here, is this idea of collective reflecting, or collective community-based reflection. So reflecting with others can be really powerful. So the first one that we really like, and we're kind of biased, is this idea of finding an accountability partner. This is actually how we started our podcast a few years ago. Anna and I met both teaching at a university in New York City, and it started off as, you know, sort of informal, having coffee, talking about what's working well in our classes and what wasn't. And it turned into a podcast about reflective pedagogy. So, you know, find a person who you're interested in sharing your thoughts with, someone who can hold you accountable for the things that you say you're going to do, and continue that relationship and see what happens. You know, the idea of having a professional learning network or a learning community, a PLN or a PLC, joining a group of like-minded individuals, that is really wonderful for accountability as well. Sakopi is a great example of a learning community. You're already doing this. You already found your people, so to speak. And, you know, with now all of the digital opportunities we have, these learning communities don't have to be in person. It doesn't have to be a scheduled meeting in person in a physical space. It can be online. So you have, you know, both online learning and in-person learning communities that you can take advantage of now. Social media, discussion forums, all of that also is considered a sort of a piece of an online learning community. So we recommend taking advantage of those. And then lastly, connect with a mentor. Find someone, you know, who's been teaching longer than you, who can support you through some of the challenges that you will inevitably face as a teacher. I would say a new teacher, but, you know, even a mid-career professional, we all experience new challenges every day. So having someone just to support you in a way that maybe you can't support yourself. And it goes in the other direction as well. Become a mentor. Everyone in this Zoom right now is able to share value with other teachers. So embrace what you have within your network and within yourself as well. So whether you prefer to work alone in your reflection or reflect with others, you really have to be strategic about how you're bringing reflection into your practice in a way that is sustainable. So we recommend establishing a routine for reflecting on your practice. And this might look different for everyone. Anna and I have had success with creating calendar notifications to keep you on track or to keep us on track. Choosing a time to reflect that's maybe the same every day or every week, just to kind of create that routine. It's like, something's missing this week. Oh yeah, I haven't had a chance to reflect on my teaching, right? So building it into your routine, just like you would exercise or practicing a language, right? Date night with yourself, essentially. I like to think of it. Another way is to schedule email prompts that encourage some sort of quick reflection. This could be as simple as, what was the most effective part of your lesson today, or ineffective part if you want to take like sort of a negative approach. I say start with the positive. What was the most effective part of your lesson? And why do you think that is? What was it that made your lesson so solid today? And just a simple prompt like this will get you to, again, build that routine within your daily life. Another piece is that you really want to make sure that your reflective practice is sustainable and doesn't cause overwhelm. So as teachers, and Anna and I, we do this all the time, we get super excited about something and we say, I want to do it all right now. But then we get overwhelmed because we've tried to do everything all at once. So don't try to do everything. We know that it's tempting. Choose one new reflective practice to focus on and allow that to be your focus. Don't try to do everything. Also, talk to yourself as you would a friend. We tend to be really kind of critical. We're really critical of ourselves way more than we are the people we love. So I think sometimes I need to talk to myself more like I would talk to Anna. I think about how my words are going to impact her. I lead with the positive, right? Whereas if I'm just talking to myself, I'm usually like, Shay, that was awful, right? I start right away with the criticism. Being reflective doesn't mean that you have to be overly critical. It's not just about finding what's wrong with you and becoming better. It's it can be finding your strengths and building upon them as well. And then lastly, feel free to pivot when something isn't working. When we notice something isn't working in the classroom, we don't force our students through it, right? We don't make them suffer, we pivot. So give that same service to yourself. When you notice it's not working for you, change gears. That's perfectly fine. That's part of the journey.
So reflection is really a powerful tool. And so in this moment, as we're truly, feeling this, that we're leaving the pandemic years behind, this is really a crucial moment. It's our chance to reflect on everything that we've gone through, everything we've learned, and use our reflection to determine next steps. So we're thinking at a higher level as well, right? Not just lesson by lesson. So I want you to stop and think for a moment, and you don't need to put anything in the chat. Just think about it for yourself. What was your pandemic journey? What was that experience like? We're sure that just as it was for us, we're sure that it was a winding road for all of you as teachers going through the past few years. What we do know, and I'm sure you empathize with, is that, educators at the beginning of the pandemic were forced to very quickly adapt their teaching methods to a new virtual landscape. And that was really, really hard. And it was, all of us at the beginning, I remember, Shay and I, we were just rushing to find any information we could, any professional development we could to learn the new skills and the strategies we needed for online teaching. So we started to create support networks for ourselves and engage in new forms of professional learning in new virtual spaces. And so I think it's pretty safe to say that the face of PD, of professional development, really underwent a dramatic change. At least for us, it did. And so I want you to think a little bit deeper about your pandemic experience and about your professional development during that time in particular. What kinds of support did you seek out during the pandemic? What kinds of professional development did you participate in during the pandemic? And I'm sure you're still participating in some of that professional development after we're at the end of this pandemic. So if you'd please like to respond in the chat, we'd love to hear some of your thoughts. What kinds of support did you seek out? What kinds of opportunities, of online opportunities for professional learning did you try out and maybe you're still doing? I don't know about you, but I see Adriana. Adriana is saying, new platforms, Seesaw, Teams, Google Class, right? G Class. Those are great ways to actually just, have a platform for teaching and also for engaging in professional development, right? We're all using Zoom for this webinar. And then socio-emotional support, absolutely. Oh my gosh, we were all so stressed. I mean, we still are stressed. We're teachers, but having that emotional support was really, really helpful. Yeah, I definitely sought that out as well. And then I see we have some teacher leaders, helping their institutions to support teachers in the use of tech and methodologies. I'm sure that you found lots of creative ways of bringing that professional development to your teachers, maybe through informal discussions online or like WhatsApp groups and whatever it was that you were using to kind of share resources. Yeah, learning how to record videos. There was just so much to learn. But also I want to say, we also started watching more videos. We weren't just going to professional development in person, in a room with a bunch of people. We're recording this webinar so that people can watch it later, right, at home whenever they want to. And so we were all, watching a lot of those recordings. Yeah, awesome. Crazy. It's very crazy to have to learn to use any tool. So we were looking for articles, we were looking for webinars, we were looking for video recordings, whatever we could get our hands on, support groups, whatever we could get our hands on to make it through all of that. Great.
Yeah, crazy is a great way to describe it. I remember Anna and I talking about just how we were exhausted from all of the input, reading these articles, watching webinars, trying to figure out how to support teachers and support ourselves. So I think crazy is a good way to put it. So what has become abundantly clear for all of us is that online forms of support served as a bridge for educators in a really challenging moment, right? Something that none of us were anticipating, I think. So, here are some of the major formats that we took part in that some of you have highlighted. Certificate courses were really prominent, like how do I become proficient in the use of Google Classroom, something like that. So certificate programs, workshops, right? Like this one, right? Workshops put on by Asakopi, discussions on social media. Teachers were taking to teacher Twitter like crazy to try to figure out how to support one another. So those are just a couple of the different formats that we really took advantage of. And, not only were these forms of online teacher professional development, or OTPD, our saving grace back then, but they continue to support teachers now, right? That's what we're noticing. As the pandemic has reached a new state of normalcy, these forms of PD, which were sort of cutting edge at 3 years ago, have not waned, but they're here to stay, right? Alongside some of those more traditional forms of analog PD that we all know and love. But let's talk about some of the advantages of virtual PD. So the first one is about connecting with resources and organizations that you wouldn't have normally. So I like to call them like out of network organizations. So, we are not ASACOPI members yet, but still, we're here to work with you. And this wasn't something that was super common, 3 or 5 years ago. We just didn't think about it. So, the sort of out of network opportunity is really wonderful. You have this opportunity then to grow your network beyond your immediate context. So in engaging in this professional development together, we are internationalizing our community of practice, which is just really incredible. And then we also have to think about niche offerings. So really, as teachers, we tend to get really into super specific things in the field, and especially as researchers, right? Sometimes what you're looking to research or understand more deeply is not in your immediate context. So you can find niche offerings that are, in other communities of practice and take advantage of them. And not to mention the last, I think for me, the biggest benefit of a virtual PD is I can be a couch potato. So that's not a super common phrase I'm realizing everywhere in the world. So we could say, in Colombia, it's, PD desde la comodidad de la casa or del hogar, or que se puede hacer en pijamas, sin bañarse, right? I love that I don't need to put real pants on to engage in virtual PD. So that's something that's a real highlight for me. I won't show you my ridiculous pants right now. Just trust me. So we like virtual PD, but we still believe in some of these more old school forms of PD. So let's just quickly, for the sake of memory, let's highlight some of them. So we sort of have like 3 different categories for old school or analog forms of PD. So institution-based, it might be peer observations, collaborating on a project like developing materials or assessment mechanisms with a peer, organizing or attending get-togethers for teacher idea exchange. Those could be all within institution-based PD. We also have organization-based PD, so like ASACOPI, so serving on the ASACOPI board, attending a conference, organizing or attending an event. All of this is also considered organization-based PD. And then lastly, a category that I think we don't always think about is, PD sort of in other contexts. So outside of our sort of immediate teaching realm, reading or writing about a specific point of interest for you, that could be considered PD. Getting a side job or a side gig that is different from your day-to-day, that could also count as a form of professional development. So all of these are valid forms of PD that we shouldn't abandon just because we have online teacher professional development, because we have the ability. Doesn't mean we should just abandon these. So between old school forms of PD and virtual forms, opportunity for professional development really seems limitless. Atkins posits that the use of technology within a learning or a training context, quote, transcends resources, geography, and individuals. And we think that this puts our new professional developed landscape really beautifully. In other words, access to PD opportunities has expanded. And now it's up to teachers to embrace this silver lining, which is using a conscious, targeted approach to professional development that's going to help them reach their learning goals individually and collaboratively with peers. And so we think that this starts with being intentional, with reframing thought processes like, I have to jump on Zoom to attend this webinar, to I get to jump on Zoom and attend this webinar with people I might never meet in person, right? So sort of reframing. And then also asking yourself, how can online offerings bolster my engagement in professional development, make me more engaged, make my time, time is valuable, make it worth it for me. And from there, begin to then embrace hybrid and online offerings. So we have some ideas that we want to share with you.
Yeah, so with all of these options, coming back to this idea of reflection, that really is the core of everything here. Reflection is the key to making the most of our PD, for setting our intentions and overcoming the overwhelm of so many options. And so I'm going to show you a little quiz that we, sorry, not just me, it's always collaborative.
Jeez.
A little quiz that we came up with here, just to kind of help you think through all of the different components of this and think through your professional development journey. And so while we're going through this, I would love for you not to write in the chat, but just to take a pen and paper, or just, use your phone app. I don't know if anyone has paper around them anymore, but take your phone app, take a pen and paper, and write down your answers independently. Reflect and write down your answers. And so here's our first question. Oh, that is not our first question. This is our first question. I want to work on. So I'd like you to just brainstorm some areas of your practice where you would like to improve on or learn more about. So you kind of need to be aware of, what are some of my strengths, and then what are some of my areas for improvement here, right? And I'm sure we're all aware of them, but just write down a few of your ideas. For me, I get very chatty when I'm doing a webinar and leading professional development, and I don't always stick to the time limits. So that's one area for me.
I'm sure that you have many more.
I know, look at us. I know we don't always finish on time.
Because we're working on it. Yeah.
We're working on it. We're reflecting on it and working on it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So brainstorm a couple of areas of your practice you would like to improve on or learn about. This is our starting point, is really reflecting on where we are in our practices. All right. I'm sure there's plenty more that you could be writing down. This is, I've opened a whole can of worms here. But I'm going to move us on to the next question. I hope you have some ideas that you've been able to write down. Our next question is, how do I learn best? We're teachers. We're thinking about how our students learn best, but how do we learn best? That's a really, maybe a tricky question. Is it through self-reflection? Is it through collaboration with others? A little bit of both? Maybe, something else, I don't know. Feel free to write down whichever one you resonate with most. How do I learn best? And I think this next one is, I think we can all answer this one pretty quickly. How do I feel about technology? Either you hate it or you love it, right? Or you just don't care. It doesn't matter. I hate it, I'm indifferent, or I'm at ease with it. Which one really corresponds to your feelings? Maybe it's more complicated than that. It's a love-hate relationship. One day you love it, one day you hate it. I'm sure you'll have a reaction to this, so please write that down for yourself. The next one is kind of tricky because we never know how busy we're going to be in a given month, but it's important to be realistic with how much we can do. I think Shay and I at the beginning of the pandemic were going to way too many things. And we've scaled it back to something more intentional now for ourselves. But how much time do I have to dedicate to professional development. Is it an hour to 3 hours? Is it 3 to 9 hours a month? Is it more than that? You know, we're busy teachers, so we have to be realistic with how much we can do, you know, whether that means we can do a full course or not. Or if we just do little webinars every now and then that help boost our skill sets.
Like the last Thursday of every month.
The last Thursday of every month.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's when Asokopi webinars happen. Great, great, great. Our next question here, be sure to write down your ideas. And this is a really tricky one. This is hard to answer in just a minute or two. But what offerings exist within my community of practice? Asokopi is one, but are there other offerings that exist? And then the hard part here is to think, you know, what's missing? Especially, you know, thinking about what you want to work on, that question you answered at the beginning. What do you want to work on? And is there something that is missing in the offerings that you're currently exposed to? Where can you go look for that, right? Because we have all of these virtual options now. Where can you go look for that specialized information, that knowledge, that skill that you want to develop? So try to write that down and maybe keep that question for yourself for later, because it takes some research also, but think about what's missing there. And then this last question is kind of the culmination of all of this. Which PD options and formats fit my needs and interests best? Right? Thinking about how we feel about technology and how much time we have and how we learn best. What are all of the options out there? We talked through several of them, and this is just a few examples on this slide. So is it an online course? Is it a regional TESOL conference or other kinds of organizations? Is it just finding a little working group of other passionate teachers in your school that want to develop something together? Is it a book club? I'm a part of a virtual book club, and we talk about, you know, some different books from both nonfiction and fiction that address our teaching needs. Is it a webinar recording or a podcast on a topic of interest? Is it just casual brainstorming as Shay and I do with an accountability partner? Is it finding a mentor or becoming a mentor? And there are just so many different formats. So as you have reasoned through all of the things that make PD positive for you, what is the option that works best for you? And where can you start seeking that out with intention? And so thank you for participating in that little guided, almost a meditation. And we will share that with you later. You can have access to that reflective tool again later. But in addition to you reflecting independently, we are a podcast and we do want you to get involved. We want to hear from you. So this is an activity that you can take away with you from today and participate in as you would like. But we'd like to feature some of you on an upcoming episode. We like to feature our listeners. We like to feature teachers, you know, with their real contexts and their real needs in our episodes. So I'm sure all of you have WhatsApp. So to be featured on an upcoming episode, we have a WhatsApp group, and we would love for you to leave us a voice message after the webinar. So you have the link here that Shay put in the chat box. We'd love for you to join that so you can also hear what other people say. And you can leave a voice memo in which you answer a couple of these few questions. So tell us your name, your pronouns, your professional role. Tell us what your professional development goals are now. So what we just reflected on, okay? And then how has your approach to professional development evolved? right? So we've talked about this whole, our whole transition during the pandemic. How has it evolved? Where are you now? What PD options and formats do you plan to engage in? So that's really that last question, right? What are your intentions for, carrying all of these options from the pandemic forward with you? And so I'll give my example here. So I'm going to record, and a couple of people are on here, so you're going to get to listen to it again later. My name is Anna Triani Dean. I'm on my WhatsApp. My pronouns are she, her. I live in the United States, and I am the co-host of the Teacher Think Aloud podcast. I'm trying to expand my understanding of AI and how to use applications like ChatGPT for teaching, because I know nothing about them, but I need to learn more. Since the start of the pandemic, I've had a chance to engage in professional development with teachers from around the world more than I ever could before, thanks to technology. And so I plan to continue to engage in local TESOL organizations in places that I have not yet been fortunate enough to visit in person, such as Colombia.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Anna, we can see Anna's voice message in the Friends of the Podcast WhatsApp group. And I see that a bunch of you have already joined. So that's exciting. Welcome. Thank you. And we're so excited to welcome you into this international community of practice and hear your reflections. You'll meet teachers from Iraq, Iran, the country of Georgia. We've got people from all over the world in this group. So, please feel free to engage beyond, just sharing your reflections here. So, sort of as a recap and just looking forward, we do have some resources we want to share with you, but we do have sort of some final reflections as well. On a final note, we really want to encourage you to think about professional development from a holistic perspective. So that is, your whole self, not just your teacher self. So first, setting your intention for your PD, remembering you can't do everything, reflecting on your strengths and your weaknesses, and maybe just choosing one or two areas of interest and allowing that to be your focus for the time. I just threw my pen. If you focus your energy on just one or two things, you're more likely to see better results more quickly, right? Also consider how your professional development is fitting into your life. It's not, we don't have, the ability to just take off our teacher hats and be nothing else. We are other things, right? We are siblings, mothers, spouses, we're a lot of things. So you know what your capacity is for timing. It's important for you to discern ahead of time how much you have to commit to professional development so that you can avoid, feeling negative about disappointment, about professional development, or feeling frustrated. Just a few minutes a day can really make a huge difference. So take that into consideration. And then lastly, be kind to yourself in the process. This is a lifelong journey. I don't think anyone has the answers. There is no perfect educator, but there are more intentional educators. So just think about how you can be more intentional in your practice, and we think you'll start to notice a lot of differences. And so the last piece that we want to share with you is a resource list, or a resource. I guess it's more than a list. There's a lot of things. You can actually click on each of these elements here. And we think that there are a lot of things that will be useful for you on your reflective journey. Note that at the bottom there, you can see that we've included that interactive quiz that Anna walked you through. So if you didn't, take the time, or you didn't feel like you had enough time to sort of go through those questions thoughtfully, please revisit it, and share it with friends as well. There is a link to a printable PDF version of that quiz. You'll also find that there are some articles, actually Asakopi, at my conversation with Katie and Claudia, you'll find they're taking advantage of Global ELT Association's online offerings. That's an article I wrote and I featured Asakopi, so please check it out and shout out to the board members who talked to me for that. You can also find some blog posts that we wrote related to reflective pedagogy, and of course, our episodes from the podcast that are most directly related to this topic. Every episode of ours is exploring a piece of teaching English from a reflective perspective. But these two episodes are really going to get at the heart of what reflective pedagogy is and how to approach professional development holistically. So we encourage you to make use of this resource that we've created. And
you can also join the conversation if you weren't able to get that into that WhatsApp chat just now. You can click on here. So here is that link for you. Okay. So feel free to join our WhatsApp chat as well after the fact. Yeah.
Okay. And so I believe that brings us to the end of our time. We wanted to leave a few minutes for questions or just sharing your thoughts about what it means to be a reflective educator. We'd love to have a chance right now to speak with you. Just so you know, we will share this slide deck with you. We're very interested in sharing almost everything that we create. We believe in sharing. Sharing is caring. So in the last two slides of this slide deck, you can find our references along with additional resources related to reflective pedagogy that have sort of shaped our thinking along the way. And so Anna, if you want to go back to the contact slide, here's how you can get in touch with us. There it is. Scan the QR code, you'll find our website, and please connect with us on social media so we can continue the conversation. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. This was beautiful. I mean, these are the kind of spaces that we love having. Actually, these webinars started during the pandemic. The members of the board of directors started having them like every week, depending on what they were hearing from teachers. So teachers needed to learn how to use Teams, so a webinar on Teams, and the next week a webinar on how to develop materials, and the next week materials for teachers in rural areas. And it has evolved. Now we have it every month, and we're always looking for what our teachers tell us that they need. We've been talking a lot about social emotional learning and the way that teachers really need to reconnect to the practice, because we have been asked to teach. I mean, like somebody said, the pandemic is over and now we need to teach the way we were teaching, but we are not the same. And we do not connect the same with our students and not even with ourselves. So this is why we like having these kind of conversations. And I can see teachers from Colombia and teachers from other parts or places. I can see some of our students from universities, and we see preschool teachers. We have 40 people with us today, and in a couple of days, the webinar will be available in YouTube. And this is also an invitation for Anne and Shay, because we have like a repository of the webinars that we have had. And the one from last month, Anna, was about AI. It was hosted by Katie.
Exciting.
And she was talking to another teacher saying the way that they are now using the resources of AI in their classes. So what about that? one of your interests. We have some comments in the chat. Teachers are asking, teachers are saying thank you very much. And there is teacher John from Ecuador team. He says that he has some questions about references. And he says also that his students, and maybe you saw there was a group of students in a classroom watching the webinar, it's Ecuador team. They have questions about the podcast because they are working on one.
Sure.
So Teacher Don, I don't know if you want to jump in now that we have open mic.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yeah.
Great. I have a brand new computer here today. So my apologies. You know, first day of this computer on my desk, so sometimes the bugs exist. Two things. I have two senior 1 and senior 2 classes here. I'm in Zamora Chinchipe, which is in the Oriente or the jungle, I guess, part of Ecuador, about an hour and a half from Loja. And we're going to be doing some final projects coming up next month for the senior 1 and the senior 2 classes, and we'll be doing podcasts. And so I just had general question on that process. It's new to me. And the other question was, when I was working on my doctoral work in international interdisciplinary experiential service learning, that's a mouthful, I covered Donald Schoen, the architect, and the idea of the reflective practitioner. And it was kind of a spiraling, hopefully upward, idea of reflective practice. And I was wondering if that's the same Schoen that you had mentioned. I'm sorry, it was Anna or Shaylin. I'm not sure who had mentioned it, but I was curious on that because I saw the umlauts. And so I thought, I bet that's Donald Schoen. I'm not sure though. Could you clarify that first?
Yes, so it is Donald Schoen, and actually, Anna, you're on the right page. We've got Donald Schoen, yeah, the reflective practitioner, and I love.
I'm an architect and came into teaching through the back door, so.
Cool.
Great, awesome.
Amazing, yeah, same
Yeah.
guy, and you know that really does speak to your experience with interdisciplinary education, right?
Yeah.
Thinking
Yeah,
about mhm.
If you want to hear my dissertation title, it's International Interdisciplinary Experiential Service Learning in Higher
Mhm.
Education.
Wow.
Now,
Amazing.
what does that mean? Well, I try to distill it down to people as the Peace Corps for architects or designers, technical professionals. And one of my ideas is that all of the technical professions that are a 5-year program should require a cross-cultural year abroad as part of their requirement for graduation. Now that's
Mhm.
that's a tall order,
We
but
love
I
it,
think
though.
it's with the changing world, I think it's a good thing.
Mhm.
But in some places are doing it, but it's becoming more common. But because of internet and online, we can be cross-cultural. We're cross-cultural right now. I'm not sure how many
Absolutely.
countries are represented here, but I imagine quite a few.
Yeah, and we love those conversations about cross-cultural communication and intercultural communicative competence. That's really one of our, one of the focuses of our podcast. We really also agree with you that, having those intercultural exchanges and people being able to, if not travel abroad, which is challenging, connect with people from other
Mhm.
countries with other perspectives. It doesn't even have to be the other country, just finding people with different perspectives. I mean, that's huge. And I love that service learning is part of what you're talking about as part of that, Peace Corps being, I guess, a model for service learning, but there's so many others out there. Mhm.
Yeah, well, I heard a lot of familiar people, of course, Dewey, that was early on in my research and
Big name, yeah.
so I was again, interdisciplinary in higher education and then in design education. So it was kind of a hybrid, but any specific ideas for my students on how they should go about the project of podcasts? I'm just now becoming, I found some websites on podcast creation and I'm just kind of getting into it. And basically looks like you create an audio file and then maybe do some post-production and some things and kind of jazz it up to make it interesting, and then you share it via social media. Is that a kind of a summary, or how would you say you create a podcast?
That's a good that's a summary for sure. But but yeah, I think that you're on the right track. Actually, Anna and I have presented before on how to build a podcast for English language teaching. So maybe if you, I mean, we would invite you to
Yeah.
send us an email. If you could send us an email,
Mhm.
we would love to share more tips with you. And that, you know, that offer stands for everybody.
Mhm.
We'd love to support you in the process of, you know, podcasting with your students, or, you know, if you wanted to create a teacher facing podcast like the one we have, you know, we'd love to chat more about that.
I think you've been too generous today with resources and your contact in the WhatsApp group and the exercise we made. So I really want to invite all teachers and those who are not teachers but are becoming just to explore that, as Claudia Uribe, who's part also of ASCOPI. She's actually president of ASCOPI. She says it's about being, you know, your teacher
Mm.
being, your human being, your woman
Mhm.
being, your, I mean, like, it's this construction. So I really
Mhm.
appreciate and thank that you have been so generous to us today, with us today. And I
Our
want to keep
pleasure.
inviting our community because we have many things. I mean, like ASCOPI is trying to build, as part of our mission, this international community in which we can learn from each other. As I was saying at the beginning, and of course I have to play my video again. But is we have the webinar and we have the How Journal that is totally free and online. And we also have, I'll display it for those of you who maybe don't know us. So we have our conference going on in Manizales in October, and we are still on early registration fee if you want to attend or if you are now a presenter. And we're going to have our next webinar on the last Thursday of each month. And ASCOPI has started a round of national workshops. We were already in Armenia, in UPTC Tunja, and we will be and Manizales with Universidad Autónoma on May the 3rd. We will also be in a special talk for Universidad de La Salle. We were invited. We will be in Uniminuto, close in May. So we have many things going on. As you said, there are many ways in which we can connect. We can connect through the journal. We can connect through the webinars, but also face-to-face in these talks that we're having. We have special interest groups that you can also join in Colombia and out of Colombia. And there are many things that we want to talk about because teaching, building community is much more than just going to a classroom and teach and then go to the teacher's lounge and say how hard your day was. And I think that we can all be part of this. So I really want to thank you all. And I hope to see you around. And I am sure that we will be ready for a part 2 very soon because we love you guys.
Adriana, nosotros son vecinos.
Somos vecinos, John. That's it. You already have our info. Let's
Been to
talk.
Peru. I've been to Peru. I've lived here 14 years, but I want to go to Colombia. It's on my list.
Okay, it's our pleasure to have you here. Just let us know. You already have our contact info. Thank you for
Okay.
joining us with your students.
Mucho gusto.
Mucho gusto. Okay, so we are going to stop recording. You can